I guess. Hey, thought I'd just hop up and make my a long rambling video on thoughts about things right now. And of course, to remain thematic, I thought a lot of this might also function as an Anton critique to some extent, right? And so, what to talk about? What to talk about? Yeah, I just watched a Great Text video, right? And he was talking about Anton and nicotine, and I was thinking about Peter and tool time, and how Peter was kind of stumbling over his words to Anton. And I sat there and I thought, this is too bad. That there's this, as Great Text would put it, this snobbery going on, and that there's this sort of kind of this this notion about internet discourse or about YouTube discourse, and what's it made of, and gosh shucks, it's just not good enough. It's not engaging enough or powerful enough or intellectual enough, and it must be the medium. Oh boy, it must be the medium. And it just, it was just kind of sad to watch Peter kind of stumble through this. I better ask Professor Anton, and then to see Anton's answer to him just made me think, he didn't, I don't think, address the Alice in Wonderland aspect, right? And I guess what's spurring me to actually make this video is this might be more of a video to tool time than anybody else, but I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. What I'm getting at, though, is that Anton set the stage, right? And he's used his ethos and his oratory skills, which he mastered, so he says, through being a good reader. And that's fine and dandy. And as a professor now, he really wants to imbue that idea onto students of not only being a good reader, but being, reading good books. And so anyway, what to say? Yeah, Alice is bored because she doesn't have a lot of pictures. She wants pictures. She wants pictures in her book, right? And maybe the iPhone and music videos and videos in general are the cure for boredom. What do you think about that, Peter? What do you think about it? This idea, like Anton then separates, as he says, this is a belabored point where he's separating what he believes are the distinctions of the senses in order to speak about, sight versus the haptic. And so anyway, what I'm saying is this: at any given point in your life, whoever you are, you have, like, let's say, a knowledge set, right? And maybe it's a blurry edge set, and it's shifty and it's mutable, or maybe it's very exacting and your memory is very, the focal points are very precision oriented. But whatever that set is, that is what you have. That is who you are. That is the person you are. And if you want to assume or view yourself that you're running into hierarchies, right, then that's the level that you're at, right? But this assumes like this kind of level through a hierarchy instead of oh, here's a hierarchy, here's a pyramid, and instead of being this level, I kind of come at it this way. I'm kind of at this level, if one is to speak about where their mind is. But honestly, I think it's more, like, what does it mean to have a metaphor of one's knowledge set relative to a hierarchy? Seriously, and then to examine what it means to follow the rules of a hierarchy, or what it means, the definition of a hierarchy, right? Like, well, what's the definition of the hierarchy? These are points of contention that I've gone on for years. Well, not for years. Well, maybe years, a couple years. I mean, I made it a hobby. When I bumped into Anton, I thought, this guy is so stinking pious, and he's taking advantage of the priestly class of being a professor. He now is functioning in such a way as to only engage people not only on his terms, which I agree is a good idea. Engage people on your terms, right? But the thing is he says he's there for ideas, but he only engages people if, like Peter or nicotine or God, I don't know what's thou art that. These guys are kowtowing, they're brown nosing. That their general attitude is being lesser than and being very respectful of the professor, as if, and for whatever reason, they assume that the ideas that he has espoused or his modality of communication is dominant over their skill set, over their knowledge set, over their, like, oh, his reading list has eclipsed my own, right? Therefore, I need to act as student, right? Now, this was very interesting. And sorry, I'm just going to zigzag like I normally do, right? If you read Anton's paper on, what was it called? The Practice of Reading Good Books, and you get down to this, the last section, like closing remarks above acknowledgments, he's quoting, oh God, who is it? Oh boy, okay, off on that. He's quoting somebody, but he's quoting him to use his own words, right? And to basically get a point across. And the point across in this paper is that the professor needs to be very wary about putting themselves at the student's level, right? And then there's a caveat to that, like, well, everyone has the level, but make certain as a professor you do not put yourself at the student's level if you're tempted to do so, right? This is part of the priestly class. This is part of the egotism that bumping into Anton years ago, and so many people smell it on him, right? This piety, this snobbery, this lack of civility, right? Now, this may be appropriate in the hierarchies of the institution, and I call it the canonical university institution. If you are there and you're amongst that hierarchy and you want to play the game, and there's certain civil discourses or certain rules that you need to follow, who's the leader, who's the follower, and be a part of that hierarchy, that's fine. But when you're on the internet, right, and you're speaking with people of diverse knowledge sets and backgrounds, right, and ways of approaching the world, right, and you only really truly respond to them if they're going to first kiss your ass, right? Now, it kind of sucked to see, the one exception I thought was Gary and Anton getting together in Manham, right? And here they are going back and forth, And Anton's just going to keep on saying, crypto religious. He's partially this type of religious person, but in a way, it's almost as if he's, to be religious just means to follow a dogma or to follow the traditions of the Western speaker, right? So, I don't know. This is such a babbly intro because I guess I'm still in the intro part of this because I wanted to knock out 15 minutes of intro and then just keep kind of narrowing it down, right? So anyway, when I first bumped it, go ahead and read Anton's papers, right? They're not great, right? He's blowing smoke up his own bum, having other colleagues say, "Oh, it's really groundbreaking work in communications and this and that," but take them for what they're worth. They are what they are, just like everything. It is what it is. The value that one takes from another's work is, the substance level that one feels they've gathered when they're interacting or intersecting another author or another personality, medium that's expressing a personality. You take from it what you will. You take from it what and who you are. So it would seem. Okay, what am I getting at here, though? I want to kind of just set the stage that Tool Time's a student. Thou art that's trying to get his PhD. Nicotine, I don't know enough about nicotine to know what's up, right? But college students, right? College students often think or feel privileged by being in college, right? Compared to people that take trades that don't go to college. And so there's a little bit of snobbery there, and then there's a little bit of competition in terms of, oh, what do you study? Oh, you study math? Oh, I study sociology. Oh, I'm in anthropology. I'm in art. I'm in music. I'm etc. etc. And that certain classes, the engineers look on the art department like, whoa, poo-poo on them. And then you got the communications department, which is now like, I really think science needs a good semiotician to come in there and really work out the details of what is meant by the metaphors in science and, help facilitate a lingual transition between the humanities and the science. And so they're kind of like butting in, like there's a dying woman and, it's not a doctor that's showing up there. It's somebody saying, hey, back up, this woman needs air, right? This woman needs air. Right? That's what the communications professional seems as if they're about. Anyway, so what does it mean? Go ahead and read his dissertation, right? If this is what it takes to get a dissertation, I'm probably in the wrong field altogether, but really, this is what it takes to be to be a doctoral candidate and get a dissertation. That's incredible, right? Now, granted, I'm not. God, I don't know. I guess I always assumed there was something more to human potential that was driving humanity professors. I always assumed that there was something as groundbreaking as Derrida or Nietzsche. I always assumed that the people moving through to get their doctoral degree were going to put forth real work, real earth-shaking, value-moving, floor-pulling workout, right? To the extent that Anton has, how to put it, to the extent that he's he's offered up, dreamless sleep, the question of zero, the sliding scale of hypocrisy, the register of the individual, pointing to the distinction between the knowledge, the epistemological realms, and the ontological considerations. Really pushing for ontological considerations. The more he's speaking about logical forms, he is properly putting forth ideas that people can gather. So I'm not trying to say his value is not there. It's a matter of fact, his value is there. But there's something, and it's not just how he interacts, the fact that he takes this higher approach, that he doesn't want, he first assumes everyone is on a student level unless they're a professor or somebody that's an author that he appreciates, right? And if you're not there, then you are a student and you are to be below him, right? Even Ernest Becker's Angel in Armor, there's certain mannerisms, I think it's in the 3rd chapter, that you can see Anton when he was pushing Ernest Becker, which is, if you believe you're the higher man than somebody else, you nod in agreement with the individual before deferring and predominating your idea over them. So it's an actual socializing technique, make certain that you're sitting in the same location. The fact that he sits in this location. These are techniques that he's learning. These are not expressions abounding from his heart and his authentic soul. And maybe in the classroom, like he said, he's juggling or he's more animated and he's more authentic there. But what he's putting forth are, it seems to me to be self-theories, right? He's putting forth practices like, hey, let's, how to pick up women. Say these 3 lines and kind of look this way and look that way at this time. He's putting into motion things that he's read in order to try to develop a grander audience, a grander viewing audience, and hence greater power and a greater following. And he even puts forth the notion, how do you avoid hierarchies? Hierarchies just are, right? Look at our law structure. The question of hierarchies is very interesting. I mean, when you look at Wittgenstein's rule following, and he talks about, the idea of the natural movement into language, watching a child prelingually move into speaking and writing, Wittgenstein points to the idea of, that humans have this particular convention about them, that they look from the shoulder through the elbow, through the wrist to the finger and off to the end in the direction of the arm in a straight-linedness. And that's a particular hard wiring about being human that we seem to be able to start our notion of sign and signified by pointing to objects and naming objects, but in the convention of pointing, right? And the natural growth of a parent's relationship to a child, right? The natural development, it would appear that one could say there's a hierarchy because there's a leader, the parent, who is speaking the language, and then there's a follower, the child, who is following the rules of the grammar, of the language, right? And so that one then wants to assume that the paradigm of hierarchy is to be overlaid and said that the speaker is the author or the speaker or the one in power, the one being listened to, is the point of the hierarchy, and the ones following are the ones that are on the lower set of a hierarchy. And that appears to be like what I would say, to me, the smallest type, the most natural and the most basic notion of a hierarchy. On it, what I would say is it's the nascent, or more the birthing of a hierarchy, if one wants to imbue the description or a paradigm that they're saying that this is the case, and point to it, right? And then you have hierarchies of power, not just in families, but in government. But a hierarchy and following rules are really important, because if one doesn't follow the hierarchy and or the rules, let's say of law, civil and federal law, criminal law, in whatever environment, or whatever the rules of the tribe, spoken or unspoken laws, right? Then they're immediately noticed, and if not noticed, they're reported, and if violation is there, then then they suffer the problems with the violation. And so I think the real quandaries, right? Like Anton will say, oh, well, zero is one of the most fun, dreamless sleep. This notion of absence is or negation is the most fascinating aspects of philosophy, and you might actually get people to agree with them, right? Like, oh, like, well, shucks, I guess there's really nothing else to say about anything else. He's the one saying that's the most fascinating aspect. Well, I guess it is, and it's just absurd. But if they're going to follow the lead and assume, this is why Graytech says stuff like, hey, man, this notion of people not talking on the tubes has a lot to do with kind of this idea, like, well, is there going to be any leniency for my idea? Is what it is I'm saying going to be scoffed at as being nonsense? Like, when I first did my first video to Anton, it's like, hey, that's nonsense, it doesn't make any sense. His reply, blah, blah, blah. He was immediately downplaying it. And then you read his books, and it's like, look, you really have to get into an author on the author's terms, right? On the author's terms, in order to understand that author. He never did that. Never had the respect with me. It was always this uppity, snobbish piety, this horseshit. And at that point, I realized, God, unlike every other person I've dealt with on here, in a few years of being on here, here is this bastard that not only has this power, like, right, he makes a video to TJ, the Amazing Atheist, saying, you've got all this power, you got, like, you've got a lot of power, and that's what you're going to talk about. Make, like, make certain it's important, like trying to really impress the idea that having that power is, a great responsibility because you have that kind of population watching you, right? And yet, at the same time, in his trying to climb up TJ's butt, right, and inform him of that power while trying to power grab himself, right, he won't listen to anybody else that's trying to alter the discussion, right? Sorry, that wasn't my point. I forgot my point. Anyway, and so as I bumble through my bitch and moan session here, I kind of want Peter Tooltime to feel maybe more at ease with bumbling through, but not being apologetic for his person, right? But anyway, so there's this notion of the zero and dreamless sleep is what's most important, and logical typing and categories and such are very, very important. But I think the notion of paradigms and hierarchies and the notion of trying to exhume the idea of community. There's a paradigm floating around that we are part of a YouTube community. This is so reiterated. So many people believe it. Look, we're members of a software program on the net, right? The way we say we're a community is when we interact with one another habitually and regularly, then we find a process and a practice of reaction and response to one another in such a way that we can then say there's an exclusivity to it and an inclusivity to it. And as soon as that is formed, we say, we're part of a community. But just to join as a member of a software program, by default to say we're a community as opposed to saying, look, public versus communal. We're just part of a public, right? A public grouping of members, right? That's what we are. Oh, no, it just came to mind, so I'm gonna babble in this direction for a minute. I remember Jericho movie came on, right? And he had an interview with Anton, and Anton was trying to dissuade this modern notion of the individual, right? Really to go down to this idea, of, and he didn't say that, but the idea that, it's not so much that I have language as much as language has me. As much as every part of my grammar and the formation of words came from reiterability prior to the self, right? And so the language as a whole has you more than you have it. The idea of saying I am an individual is also a paradigmatic phrase or a meme or a segment of words that are reiterated in this particular fashion. And because there's this reiterability, it would seem to me, or it seems to me, that the idea of the individual, right? Sorry, I gotta keep adding more bubbles of this, more caveats, more exceptions to what it is I'm saying. The idea of the individual, like the hierarchy, is a fine paradigm. What philosophy is to me, how it is I see it, it's a matter of bonding certain ideas here and separating other ideas here, and then utilizing the bonding ideas to predominate over the separated ideas, or using the separated ideas to outline the bonding ideas. So Anton will argue you can't escape hierarchy, right? But then he'll argue that the individual is somewhat of a myth, right? And so he's bound in one area and not bound in another area, right? He finds awe in the zero and in absence, right? But at the same time, he will find the not operator to be predominant over absence. I'll try to get back to that. Anyway, so it's so weird. My ecstatic energy and how it is I'm approaching this babble, right, is very weird to me, because it's like, wow, this is the free form and the speed of my thought when I'm engaging this while I'm talking about this. So very, very interesting to think about that. But okay, so the individual, right, to speak about growing oneself so one has a mind worth having, right, and then having this arbitrary reading list, that maybe some other author had a reading list of books, some other author had a reading list, and saying these are the good books, these are the ones that you should read, right? These are arbitrary lists. This is the whole point. This is what I'm getting at, is Peter, you are your own man. It is so good to see your strength and your power and your own honor. And it's nice to see you ask somebody, but to feel as if you're inadequate in the very process of acting, or in whatever instinctual conclusion that you have about this philosophy prior to getting what you might think is a more sophisticated or a more well-regarded answer, right? The mere fact that you feel lesser, right? Because you are inquisitive, you do want to know. But the mere fact that you already, it feels you have, I would imagine, a notion of what it means to identify with Alice being bored. Okay. What to say? To me, and I've tried to bring this up, Anton uses participles. I try to bring this up in terms of argumentation. When you watch how somebody, an individual, engages, not only an author, but they're engaged in discourse, and it's almost a type like syntax as little warriors, right, warring against one another. In these cases, it appears as if there are, if you were to write out script what was being said and outline, like do those old diagonal word puzzles you find in newspapers, right, and outline all of the participles that are being used in someone's argument and extract them. And then outline all of the prepositions, like, oh, okay, this seems to be a prepositional argument, kind of like my argument against Benatar's imposition, that there is in fact no imposition. So Gary has to acquiesce and say, well, you come from your parent, that's the point. They're the ones that are giving you the life, right? Where I'm saying, look, you have to exist prior to having something imposed upon you. You cannot not exist and then have existence be the imposition, because by definition you are that existence, right? And so to me, the fascinating things about philosophy, not that anyone asks, thanks for asking, but not that anyone asks, it is the statements of is. It's the notion of the E prime. It's the notion that stating what is the case and believing it, being static on a position. Everyone must hold a bias in order to create a sense. One must, in order to make statements clear, there has to be an assumption, that first leap into language, right? But it's done daily, where you start with the presumption, you start with a base thought about something that is or is equivalent to something else, and you start, and that is the root from which you formulate further discourse, right? And then you go back and you try to pull out the carpet that was supporting it. Then you go back and you try to negate that association, right? And you fall into levels of hypocrisy, but you fall into levels of deconstruction. Personally, I think that becoming a nihilist, losing all sense of all groundedness, is very, very important. It's not just climbing up a tower of knowledge and pulling together the tidbits into thesis and into arguments. One, because modern deconstruction, postmodern thought now, as it's come to stage, requires the analysis of the very base root assumptions about what something is, such as this idea that bad is pain or pain is bad, and that there's no way to alter those types of statements. And so this shows a cardinality of belief, right? And so to me, the really fascinating things about philosophy is that somebody is going to put forth a proposition, and that it's your job to either abide by it, agree with it, love it, hate it, move around it, and so forth, right? My hope has just been, right now, Anton finds me antagonistic, distasteful, unsympathetic. He doesn't like the way I interact with him. And I was saying, hey, look, every part of what it is I have put forth in my videos has a large segment of importance, sincerity, a belief that I hold on to, and that's been disregarded from the beginning, right? So I feel like because of my personality type, that I haven't been invited in the discourse. And then I'm like, well, screw this, man. So anyway, so this is the whole idea of, man, where are all the vloggers, right? Where are all the vloggers? Well, when you get the guys that are showing up in college, and they're kind of always trying to downplay, right, the sharp minds that are out there, it knocks down the timid. It takes a hold of them, and then people just get tired of it. It's like, look, let these guys just go masturbate in public. But that's why I like the Caruth, right? He just came out with this, hey, let's not just talk about God, but let's talk about the phrases about God having meaning, and then focus on the meaning, right? Not on, the signified as existing or not existing, right? So it's the is statements for me. It's the revaluation, and that are important, and it's allowing someone to help you renegotiate your thoughts. To me, that is what a professor does. But if the professor, like I said, go read his paper. If the professor himself is going to say, don't stoop to that level, don't stoop to the student's level, already he assumes that whatever miraculous mind and parenting and guidance that you had that differs from his own, he already assumes he is better and that his knowledge set eclipse. Well, I'll let you know, it doesn't eclipse. It doesn't eclipse. Anton is very, very biased. Like I said, when I first came out, I feel like he knocked us back 100 years. I really felt this, like, wow, the world is ecstatic and powerful, and arrows are pointing outward, and people are just dropping bombs all over. And I still believe that. I mean, just music video and art forms and the way things are moving, it's outstanding. And then you get this kind of, woe is us, get back into book culture, you get a backskin, you get to hold it, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's like if you take Anton, it's kind of like somebody, 800 years ago saying, books, screw that, we need scroll culture. That feeling of unrolling a scroll and rolling it back up again, and the smell and the tactile sense, and the way you can roll it on the bottom or roll it on the top and have it outline, just see a line in it. It's that kind of nonsense, right? It's like this whole idea, right? Like, some people are going to love the iPhone. Like, wow, the touch, the feel, it's in my pocket, the fact that they can run their finger up and down it, this idea that one cannot absorb the content because one is not, like, having a haptic sense of what the back cover is and the front cover, and actually having a notion of how far that is, you'll redefine what it is. You'll see what number it is. You'll know how many swipes you need to make on your tablet to get to that, right? And then before long, all of this technology is going to, I already think it's, the future is now, right? It's already happening, right? And so I think what had happened in my distaste for Anton has always been that it's a snobbery. He wants to take power, right? Now, like a good rap song, sometimes you want to put your machismo, your war powers, you want to show your prowess, and put it forth in war, and then you take different techniques for war. It's just a pity to watch somebody in his position stunt people back with the presumption that we're not going to utilize our students' level as if they're here to add. We're only going to use them as entities that kowtow up the hierarchy. Okay, so anyway, so Jericho movie comes on, and then Anton, tries to slight the notion of the individual. And then later on, it takes a couple years later, then he talks about sovereignty, individual sovereignty, right? Individual sovereignty is just, to me, that's crazy. Crazy in that, or solidarity. Look, as soon as one becomes a real person, not only will they point to their influences, right, and they'll point to where it is they came from. So at some magical level, the individual becomes a real person, a real individual. But not up until then. If you use it up until then, you're just a product of language, right? But then at some point, you gather power. You're able to authorize works, really claim oneself, twist oneself off like the edge of a clown balloon, and claim and point and say, I am that person, right? And so, okay, here's another idea. Derrida thinks that writing came before speaking, but by writing, he means writing on the mind. That is, one learns a grammar, one is writing on the mind, like they're memorizing it, but they're using some pneumatic device and writing on the mind as if we're all spiritual beings, not using the vernacular notion of writing versus speech, the use of the hand as opposed to the use of the lips. Which I would say, okay, he is now bonding, in this case, when I said bonding and separate ideas, right? We separate ideas here, and then we use those to tackle bonded ideas, and over here we use bonded ideas to tackle separated ideas. So an example of this is Derrida bonding the notion of writing. But by writing, he doesn't mean by the hand, he means writing in terms of memorizing, that we have already written the grammar down and that we have it stored in our memory, written. He calls it writing. And then speech occurs. But you have to have it written on your mind, the tablet of the mind, to use a metaphor, prior to that speech. So in that respect, it's okay to say that's okay. But the vernacular use of writing in his description is a type of, he's separating the vernacular use, the regular use, right, of writing, and then from the hand to the mind, and then he's bonding then he's taking that idea, right? Then he's taking that idea of writing on the mind, right? Writing on the mind, and bonding that together, and then using that bonded idea to move forward. The same way that Anton uses the idea that which is synthetic or man-made is natural, right? So vernacularly, we know that there's a difference between that which is an artifice and that which is synthetic and that which is manual or man-made, which is really ironic because he likes to make the distinction between humans and non-humans. So what he does is he separates, right, the vernacular use of synthetic and says all art and all human creation is an expression of the indigenous creatures of the planet, which is the humans, right? But the vernacular use is that what humans do and what humans create and how we manipulate the elements in our environment is synthetic, and that's the vernacular traditional use. And so what Anton has done, kind of like, you know, he wants to, you know, the demiurge notion, the idea that, well, let me go there yet. So anyway, so, yeah, what am I getting at? Yeah, well, basically, let me just clarify that, though. Or not clarify it, but finish it. The idea somehow that which is synthetic is bonded now with that which is natural, and that we're going to take this new definition, and that definition is going to predominate over the separation of that which was once synthetic versus or different from that which is natural, right? And we're going to bond those, we're going to take the new bonding and we're going to predominate over that which was separate, right? This is what I meant by there's a notion of bonding and separation. There's a notion of demarcation, lines of thought, right? And by lines I mean held beliefs, the first biases that one believes are facts of their statements. And this includes my own claims of my own facts of these statements to say these things. And this is where Derrida warned that even his deconstructive approach was open for future deconstruction. The thing, okay, so now with all that out of the way, what I'm suggesting is that the caveat that Anton gives is to go in and, like he says, like, I'm going to push forward these ideas, right, these specific ideas to promote his books and his well-being and his power and his prowess, and then and kind of dismantle other people's ideas, and then fall back on the idea like, hey man, I'm just putting out ideas. But when somebody else actually is trying to maneuver the conversation, another author is trying to maneuver a conversation and put forth a thesis within this medium, very candid, such as this, will he take it on? That, to me, is the question. Now, between Anton and me, specifically Anton and me, there's an argument, right, between the idea of whether or not absence is a type of negation or negation is a type of absence. And if you read naive set theory, in naive set theory, it's always assumed that there is always an empty set within all sets, right? And I was bringing up the idea of you have an empty set, which is signified by parentheticals, and then you also have an empty set, which is defined by parentheticals with a zero and a line through it for the empty set or absence. And that these are adjusted, they're swapped, they're associatively replaceable, right? Such as in generative grammar, you take what was, you know, the idea of this iconic notion, ooh, the index icon is symbol, yeah, right? And so you take this notion of something that is related in an iconic fashion, a related font fashion, and you replace it in much the same way that you, to solve some naive set theory, or to better describe it, in certain cases you'll use an empty set that has no other syntax in it. In another case, you'll use an empty, a parenthetical that has a 0 and a line through it. So anyway, I'm putting forward the idea that absence naturally occurs prior to negation, right? And Anton and I, we had a little bit of discussion on an old video before I thought, hey, I got to let this whole thing go. But then I'm like, yeah, why not make another video? People have been wanting to get it on. Need to get it on with Anton again. Anyway, so Anton drops a quote from some guy that says, obviously, absence is a type of negation, and that negation is primary to absence. And I thought this feels really unintuitive, and it seems asinine. That if one loses their car keys, that they look where they remember having left them. That's where they look. And they don't see that they observe an absence of keys. They're observing no keys, right? So the idea is, at this point, it's a replaceable notion. To say which one falls into the other almost seems absurd. So to be dogmatic about absence is a type of negation, or negation is a type of absence, seems asinine to me. But firstly, I assume the opposite